Recently, I had a chance to watch another video of Apostate Aladdin. In that video, he basically claimed that supposedly the Quran has historical errors.
Stop it.
Let's see what he has to say in regards to this, and then I'll make my response.
In verse 258 of Surah Al-Baqarah, the author is setting up a story about an arrogant king who felt emboldened by his kingship to challenge Ibrahim. Ibrahim says, "My Lord giveth life and causeth death." And the man responds, "I giveth life and causeth death." So Ibrahim says, "Allah causes the sun to rise up in the east, so how about you cause it to come up from the west?" And according to the verse, the disbeliever was utterly defeated. And if you look closely, you'll notice that the most obvious flaw in these arguments is that they're not arguments at all. These are claims on top of claims. Ibrahim claims that his God is the beginner and ender of life. He claims that his God controls the sun.
I think Apostate Aladdin basically have a comprehension problem because he clearly doesn't understand the context of this verse. So basically the verse is talking about something akin to a god king. In the past, there were this type of kings who not only claimed that they were kings, but that they were also gods. That's worthy of worship. And there are many god kings in the past. If you look at the history of Egypt, many of the pharaohs actually claimed to be gods and they demanded worship from their people. That's basically the kind of person Ibrahim is dealing with. When a god king is claiming that he himself is God, obviously he's not denying that God exists. They're not arguing or debating about whether or not God exists. Well, that's not the point. They're not making any claims. Like, they're arguing with each other based on what they already accept. So the king already accepts this concept of God exists. He just thinks it's him. So here he basically commits a straw man argument fallacy. Ibrahim is not claiming anything here.
I gave
Plenty of examples of verses that pose tremendously poor arguments.
Yeah, in your dream.
From the verse alone, we have no idea who this man is, and we don't know what he meant when he claimed to also giveth life and causeth death. So that's another criticism of the Quran. On its own, it is often lacking in context and not always clear about what it means. And mind you, this is not a language barrier for me. I speak Arabic and there isn't a single word in this verse that I don't understand. And the verses before and after it are unrelated to the story. So what am I missing? How can I begin to figure out who and what the author meant?
But I don't understand what that means.
And this is why I said you have comprehension problem. I don't speak Arabic. I'm only reading the simple text that's in front of me. He's comparing himself to God. How much clearer does it need to be? Are you dumb? Like, it's plain English. It's talking about God kings, right? So it's simple. Like, which part of this is confusing? And then he says, "Oh,
the Quran is so complicated, guys. I don't understand it. I don't understand it."
Shut up, man!
And again, which is why I think you're just being disingenuous, because I don't think that you don't actually understand this plain English or plain Arabic.
The tafsir by At-Tabari or Ibn Kathir, for example, we'll find interpretations claiming that the king killed a man on death row and let another live. That's what he meant by "I give life and cause death." We'll also find a lot of opinions identifying the king as a Namrud, with one opinion claiming that he had a temple in Babylon, another claiming that a Namrud ruled for 400 years. As far as I can tell, there is no evidence of a king named Nimrod or a Namrud actually existing outside of Christian and Islamic mythology, let alone that he lived and ruled for 400 years. Yet most Muslims take such stories to be literal accounts of real events. This makes it very hard for me to believe Islam's claims, because the decipherers of God's words believe myths and legends as if they were historical accounts. It's not very confidence-inspiring when the scholars of Islam, and possibly Muhammad himself, are confusing fiction with history. God tip number 1. If you're God and you're proving yourself through a book, I suggest that you don't make it suspiciously at odds with the observable reality.
The first logical fallacy he's committing is the argument for ignorance fallacy. First of all, just because there's no evidence for something doesn't mean that thing is not true or false. So imagine if someone in the 11th century claims that there was these giant creatures at one point, they walked on earth called dinosaurs, and then people say that there's no way that such things are real because there's no evidence of it. Now, does it mean that dinosaurs doesn't exist? No, of course not. Because whether something's true or false has nothing to do with whether that thing has evidence for it or not. Now, of course, this doesn't mean it's true either. It just means that there's no evidence of it, but that itself doesn't mean it's false either. There are many things that didn't have evidence for it that we later found evidence for it, right? This is very much possible in the future we might find evidence, right? So this kind of blanket statement, it doesn't logically follow. It's a false.
You stupid.
This makes it very hard for me to believe Islam's claims.
You stupid.
The second fallacy he's committing is that he's confusing truth claim with religious interpretation. See, when the Islamic scholars or the Mufassirun, when they're looking at quote-unquote folklore, they already admit that these things are not reliable. Like Imam Tawari in his book wrote that not every information in this book is reliable because that was not his job. His job as a a primary historian was to gather as much information as possible. This doesn't mean that every single information he's laying out is true. That's the job of like Hadith scholars. His job is to simply collect information. It's like me criticizing Christopher Nolan for making a movie on the Odyssey, even though the events of Greek mythology is mostly false. So it's not a valid critique because Christopher Nolan is not claiming that these are true events. It's a straw man. So basically that's what he's doing. He's just straw manning Imam Tabari's position.
Another problem with this scenario is that in the Islamic view of reality, magic and jinn and sorcerers are supposedly real. So how can an observer tell the difference between all that stuff and a divine miracle? If I approach an uncontacted tribe while wearing a jetpack, they probably wouldn't be able to explain how I'm flying. So does that give me enough credibility to claim anything I want about God?
Yeah, it's like I'm arguing with a child.
Because you're a fool, with all due respect.
No, the Quran is not saying that just because someone can do amazing things, therefore that means that person is God. That's a straw man. That's not the point of the verse. The verse is saying God is all powerful, right? That means that the God of the Quran is able to do anything. For example, let's use your jetpack example. Sure, you can go to a bunch of native tribes and you can go ride on this amazing jetpack. And they might look at you and think that you might be a god or whatever, right? Some of them could simply ask you the question, okay, if you're God, then can you cut yourself into 2 pieces and come back alive again? And obviously you won't be able to do that, right? The point is, when people claim that they're like God, when they're able to do this kind of amazing, miraculous thing, there will always be some things that they will fail at. There will be some things they cannot do. That's because they're not God. Let's take the example of Dajjal, right? He'll be able to do many miraculous things and many people will worship him. But of course, there will be things that even he cannot do. And he will have a marking on his forehead that he won't be able to remove, because that is given by God himself, and he doesn't have power over God. And believers will be able to see that and will be able to recognize him. There will always be things that a fraud person will not be able to do. This is how you know a truth from falsehood, by testing them.
Really odd is that merely one verse later, in verse 260, Ibrahim asks Allah to show him how he reanimates the dead. He still needed a demonstration of Allah's powers in order for his heart to be at ease. So Allah instructs Ibrahim to scatter the bird parts over several mountains and then call for them to return. And the implication is that Ibrahim did so and it worked. What I'm struggling to understand is, what is the point of this verse? If it is to show that even prophets who speak to Allah have doubts, then shouldn't Allah demonstrate his powers to every single person who has doubts?
In this verse, basically Ibrahim tells Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that raise a dead thing and bring it to life, right? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks him, have you not believed? Like, do you not believe me? And he said, yes, but I just want to see it to be satisfied. He simply had a desire to see a miracle. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fulfilled his wish. Ibrahim never said that he doubted Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Tip number 4. Be consistent. If you'll prove your abilities to one guy, you should prove them to everyone.
Just because he showed a miracle for a prophet doesn't mean he needs to show a miracle for everybody. Prophets are special people. They did a lot for God, not for the religion. So it's a non-sequitur fallacy. His argument doesn't follow that just because he showed a miracle to Ibrahim, therefore he has to show a miracle to everybody. It doesn't logically follow, because Ibrahim is clearly a special person.
Of gimmicks, you might be wondering how Ibrahim's debate would have gone if instead of a king with a god complex, he argued with a reasonable skeptic. Well, there's no need to wonder anymore, because I have been divinely inspired to know how that would go. And it would go something like this.
As I was saying, I think you should follow me, because I preach for the one true God.
I'm not yet convinced, to be honest. How exactly do I know that's true?
It's quite simple, really. My God brings life and ends it. Can you do that?
What? No, I'm not saying I can do that. I'm saying that...
Aha, so you do concede that Allah is the one true God.
No, I don't, and you're going about this all wrong.
So basically he then kind of like makes this mockery of like this conversation between a skeptic and the supposed prophet. This guy claims that you should follow me and my God. Again, Ibrahim never said that. Like, we just saw a snippet of a conversation. We don't know what the entire conversation is. So this is again already a straw man.
But, okay, I'll bite. I grow tomatoes in my garden. I bring them to life from little seeds and I harvest them when they're ripe. That's me bringing life and ending.
No, that's not what I mean. Anyone can water a seed. I mean creating life from scratch, from inorganic substances, like Allah created everything from clay.
Well, scientists are making progress in creating the building blocks of life in a lab. If they succeed, would that make them gods?
Like, do you know what a synthetic cell is, man? Like, synthetic cell is not creating something from scratch. And I looked at the paper, right, that they're talking about. Synthetic cell is an already existing thing. Like, they basically took already existing things like genome, DNA information and whatnot, Just put it together and let it work. It's like me having a bunch of car parts and I put together the car parts, then of course the car will work. Doesn't mean I created the car from scratch. Creating the car from scratch would mean every single thing that is needed for the car to be created from scratch. It doesn't mean that me taking different parts and then putting it together. That's called assembling. That's not called creating from scratch.
Do me a favor.
Dusting powder don't increase.
Do me a favor, please. Get out of here.
And yeah, if you guys like the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe. And if you want to support me, then please support me by becoming a Patreon or YouTube member. And please do subscribe to the channel. It helps a lot. And yeah, inshallah, I'll see you guys next time. Inshallah,